Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Delaveau, and I am the Assistant Vice President of Organizational Culture, Inclusion, and Equity at Simmons University. On behalf of our President, Dr. Lynn Wooten, Dr. Sharon Credo, Vice President of Organizational Culture, Learning, and Development, and the Office of Organizational Culture, Inclusion, and Equity, we welcome you. This event is sponsored in partnership with the Office of Organizational Culture, Inclusion, and Equity, the President's Advisory Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, our Advancements Office, the Student of Affairs, the Center for Leadership Engagement, Campus Recreation and Student Wellness, as well as our external partners, Bunker Hill Community College, Emmanuel College, Suffolk University, and the University of Massachusetts, Boston. We want to bring a different energy to the DEI conversation space. Now more than ever, this conversation matters. So we encourage everyone to lean in and keep the conversation going beyond this event. Right now, I have the honor of introducing our moderator for our time together today. Rochelle Smith is the director of the Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity Program, known as MECO, for Arlington Public Schools. She oversees a broad range of academic and social programming that serves 72 students from Boston in grades K through 12. Rochelle also has more than 15 years of experience in the field of organizational leadership. A natural leader with experience in public and higher education, human and social services, Rochelle prides herself in serving marginalized populations through a merit of initiatives, including facilitating strength-based workshops. In August of 2021, Rochelle earned a Master's of Social Work at Simmons University with a certification in Clinical Social Work and Urban Leadership. She also received a School of Social Work Community Service Award. During her time at Simmons University, Rochelle served as a Dean's Fellow to the Dean of Community Engagement and Social Justice and led student-focused discussions on anti-racist practices within the school setting. Rochelle was recently appointed the Vice President of the African American Alumni Association Executive Board of Simmons University and is in her third year of serving as a board of directors members for a nonprofit serving homeless women and women in recovery through sober housing. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, Rochelle collected and donated over 4,000 articles of clothing to a city-run homeless shelter in Boston. In 2018, Rochelle received Boston Public Health Commission Public Hero Acknowledgement for her work in the community. In addition to serving her community, Rochelle enjoys donating her time to the Goodwill Industries Workforce Development Program, helping and encouraging adults re-entering the workforce, spending quality time with her family, and watching her son play college basketball. It is without further ado, I give you Rochelle Smith.
Wow, thank you so much, Rachel, for the introduction. And thank you all, wonderful students, faculty, and community members alike. Thank you so much for being here for this virtual, dynamic, disruptive diversity piano performance and keynote presentation. Thank you again for being here. And it is my honor, and I am so thrilled to be your moderator for the hour. I was going to say for the evening, but we're not in the evening yet. So for the hour. So thank you all. So I am super excited to be able to introduce our keynote. Amazing. And so I'll just go right into it so that we won't waste any more time. We can get right to the meat and potatoes of this virtual dynamic experience. So she's been called a musical force of nature, classical music's #1 maverick, and one of the best keynote speakers of 2019, 2020, and 2021. Jade Simmons is a creator of transformational experiences who revels in activating people into becoming the biggest, boldest version of themselves possible. The businesswoman, speaker, musician, author, and coach has developed a knack for reinvention, and from the piano all the way to politics, Jade has made an art form out of differentiation. She inspires audacious leadership and teaches maverick behavior, as well as techniques for breakthrough to audiences worldwide through bold shifts in mindsets and powerful, implementable strategies that help people harness momentum in both life and business. Please help me welcome Jade Simmons.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. I'm over here chuckling because of the way you said creator. Your Boston accent came out and I loved it. She was like creator with an AH on the end. I think I will be using that for myself. Thank you so much for having me. Dr. Cradle, I was thinking this morning as I was preparing that there's a big difference between this presentation and all of the other DE&I presentations I've done to date. And it was really hitting me hard in a good way. And I'll tell you what that difference was as we get going. But first of all, thank you for your time and attention, your energy, and your ears today. I hope that what we get to do together leaves you feeling inspired, not just to embrace what we know already is so crucial in terms of diversity, but to really decide that you were put on this earth to be a part of leading the charge. So welcome, everyone. I'll dive right in. You know, if we are not careful, and this is something I have been saying to every organization that brings me in to speak on this topic. If we're not careful, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of that devolves into this discussion that we find ourselves being obligated to have. If we're not careful, it will begin to induce eye rolling, you know I'm right, on all sides, because we'll cease to believe in its value. It'll feel like just another conversation. I don't want this to be the tough conversation that we have to have, or the productive conversation that we really should have, and eventually the afterthought conversation that we really should get around to. So when I normally give this presentation, as I was saying earlier, I realized this morning that I'm usually speaking to corporations and organizations who are just now waking up to the fact that diversity is not only necessary, it's not only a requirement to appease the current atmosphere that we're in, that diversity is not something we engage in order to stay on the right side of cancel culture. They are just now awakening to the fact that diversity is crucial. So the difference today for me is that I get to speak to what I believe is a different demographic. You are the people who have always known this to be the case. You didn't have to wake up to this fact because you were never asleep. So the same way that we talk about certain generations, my kids, for instance, being tech natives, right? They grow up knowing instantly, right, how to use technology. I believe that many of you, the majority of you listening in, are what I call DE&I natives. This is second nature to us. You have a head start on the discussion because it was never merely a discussion for you. It has always been a way of life. What that means is that we get to lead the charge from a place that is extremely organic, right? Because it was never just a discussion. It's always been a way of life. That means that we get to lead from a place that's organic and not learned, not obligated, not forced upon us. But we get to lead from a place of experiential truth. There is nothing more powerful than that. And that got me really excited as I was getting ready for today. Now, I have the chat open. I can track with you as we go. Sometimes I will ask you to leave some comments there. I may ask questions and want to know your own experience. And if you don't mind, I'd love for you to interact there so that I can feed off of that and give you some insights in the moment. But I'm here today because I believe that you are the people who are poised to be at the forefront of turning DE&I from being an obligation to being an exploration about what we get to have. I've been having this epiphany that expectant exploration is the new diversity initiative. It is the next season beyond acceptance. Are we done with that word yet? I just feel like it's so old school. It's like acceptance is becoming the new tolerance. Remember that? Remember when we used to embrace tolerance? Thank you, God, for evolution here. So I think we're going into our next season beyond acceptance all the way to, get this, value. Who to thunk? And ultimately all the way to honor. Oh my gosh. And I believe that you guys are the head explorers, the chief explorers. That means you get to chart the paths that others will discover after you. I'm here to talk about the exploration we get to have of the people around us, regardless of, and even in spite of, their race and their gender. So let's talk about today the new paths that we get to chart. You're going to want to deal because you're going to be the leaders. Remember, I'm not only speaking to you as people in a certain climate, I'm speaking to you as people who will create the next climate. So I really want you to hold on to that. If we want to deal with things like unconscious bias, then we're going to need genuine, conscious curiosity. So something has to break our internal belief that we know everything about one another. I don't care what demographic you're in, what people group you belong to. There's some stuff you don't already know. And you're going to have to get curious. First of all, assuming you don't know a few things, and we'll talk about assumptions in a minute. First thing I want you to do is to decide to keep a curious state of mind. So that starts with developing intentionally a state of wonder. So we're going to begin to wonder now about the possibilities in ourselves and in the people that we are getting to know. Next, you're going to want to have a genuine interest. That means that we're going to decide, we're going to be really interested in the things that we are seeking to know. So we're going to think that what we are seeking to find out is genuinely worth knowing. This, let me tell you, just sidebar, this state of mind will beat sensitivity training any day of the week, because that training is almost always punitive, corrective, or obligatory. And remember, we're moving from all of those things all the way to exploratory. Next, you want to create a state of expectancy, right? Expect in advance for there to be power and value in the stories of the people around you. Expect that. We want to get into a position now of anticipation, right? That's developing an excitement on purpose about what other people will bring to the table. It's easy to get so fixated on the fact sometimes that we are not at the table, we forget to be curious about what others are bringing as well. See, it's not enough to stop at wanting a seat at the table. It's not even enough for those of us who are already in the room to make room at the table. We have to now begin to get excited about what other people are bringing with them to the table. Right? What are you adding to the menu, to the mix? Because that's what we ultimately want people to be excited about. As any organization covers topics like unconscious bias and microaggression, we instinctively do what? We think of our own story. Don't feel bad about it. It's who we are as humans. We are self-centered by nature. Everything, think about little kids, points back to them. We are currently teaching our little daughter who's 8 that everything is not about her. It's like mind-blowing for her that every discussion doesn't go back to her experience, right? So we both want to cultivate her belief in her experience, but also cultivate her curiosity simultaneously in what everybody else is bringing of worth to the table as well. Just before we go any further, for the purpose of clarification, I am talking to everyone that is listening in. I am talking to you, and yes, this is about you. So whether you're considered to be a part of the majority or the minority in your space, whether you're considered to be the person that is already been woke for a long time, or the people that are considered to still be snoring and sleeping just a little bit, I am talking to all of you. So I'm talking about you and your stories. I want you to listen differently. Remember, this is not your grandmother's diversity presentation. So diversity of story applies to everyone. And it is important because it reveals the true nature of the diversity amongst the individuals within people groups. When I say true nature, I'm not talking about our race, our skin color, our ethnicity. When I say true nature, I'm talking about the essence of all of who we are. And this is the piece that I believe is still missing in most of our initiatives today. So a part of my story is that I am indeed a Black female classical pianist. That's my background, that's my training in terms of music. But each of those words, Black, female, classical, and pianist, conjures reactions and expectations related to your story. You almost really can't help it. To be Black, it means something to each of us, even if we are not Black, even if we are Asian, right? To be female means something, even if we are a man. To be classical means something to you, even if you prefer rock or rap. Even the word pianist means something to you, even if you haven't given it much thought before now. These things mean something to you because of your story. But in truth, even though you know those words about me, Black female classical pianist, you still don't know my story. I've never met a breakthrough that was not first preceded by a break. So if we're serious about getting to breakthrough where diversity, equity, and inclusion is concerned, and if we, as I believe you to be, are the breakthrough artists that will help get the rest of the world there, we have to first look for the breaks that we have to make. First thing we break is this really ingrained habit of first associating everything we know about somebody else with our own story. So our first job in creating space for the progress we want is that we must do our best not to start a place from a place of our own expectations, and instead decide to exist in a state of expectancy. Being in a state of expectancy is different from having managed expectations. As a Black woman, I do not want you to have managed expectations about what I am capable of. We can't start from a place of stale expectations. As a female, I don't want you to have stale expectations of what you think a woman is capable of doing. And we definitely can't start from a place of stereotypical expectations. Well, all the people I know who are Korean do this, therefore, since you are Korean, you must do that also. That's a stereotypical expectations. Expectancy is powerful. It creates the curiosity. For instance, for the last 3 to 5 minutes, you've been expectant, wondering when the heck is she going to play the piano? Part of that is on purpose. I'll play when I get ready. But I do it because it builds a curiosity. If I had just launched in and started playing, I would have done exactly what you were expecting me to do. I saw the ads that said she's going to play a piano concert and then she's going to talk. Intentionally, I decided not to do that. Because there's a more powerful place than managed expectations, stale expectations, or stereotypical expectations. The place that I want this group to begin from in every situation is a place of exceeding expectations. As we encounter each other, we must go in excitedly expecting what others have to offer, assuming that they can do things we were not expecting. We want to go in expecting that there is still music that we have not yet heard, and maybe even performers we were not expecting to see. Normally, when we talk about diversity, we want to stay away from assumptions. Don't assume anything. But today, I'm going to leave you with several assumptions you should always make if you're serious about leading the charge where DE&I is concerned. This goes for all of us, whether we're new to embracing diversity intentionally or for those who are looking to lead the charge. Assumption number 1, assume that your scope is limited. I remember when I was a little girl back in South Carolina, that's my hometown, Charleston. Like all piano students, I spent hours every day just practicing fundamentals, right? A piece that really should go at a very fast clip, I would play it so slow for weeks on end before I was allowed to go faster. And I would do that because eventually I was going somewhere like a competition where accuracy would matter. So I would have to play really slow in order to get where I needed to be. Point is, I spent a lot of time at my craft. I know that we hear this 10,000 hours thing. Man, most of the people that I know have put in probably double that to get where they are. But I remember playing this Beethoven and playing it well enough that it had gotten me to the state level of this piano competition. And I was there waiting in the lobby with the 2 other finalists. Now, there I was, African-American, young female. I think I was probably 12 at the time. On my right was a Korean young man, and on my left was an East Indian young man. And we all had to wear, I remember, the same thing. The competition uniform was a white top, and a black bottom. And if you used to do the state musical competitions, you know what I'm talking about. So we looked, basically alike in terms of how we were dressed. And right before it was time to go on, right before it was time for me to go on, I was playing this in my head, really concentrating, right? This lady walks in and she looks at me and she looks at the other two guys and she's all frantic, and I'm realizing she's late. She doesn't want to miss the finale of the competition. And she looks at each of us. She looks at the Korean guy. She looks at the Indian guy. She looks at me. She looks at them one more time. And then she settles on me. And she comes over and she looks at me and she asks me, "Do you know where I'm supposed to sit? Can you show me to my seat?" Just let you cringe and catch that for a minute, what just happened. She thought that I was the usher and not the pianist. And, I had a moment there. We all have opportunities where we can decide whether or not we are going to be offended or whether we are going to do something different. I always say that I no longer take offense. I always take note. Taking offense takes way too much energy, and usually the person who did the offending either doesn't even know they offended or aren't that bothered that you're offended. So I decide now to take note. What I'm taking note of is any opportunity to teach or enlighten. This was a teaching moment. So this woman looked at me, and all I can assume was she'd seen the Korean young man and maybe thought, well, I know that all Asians play piano, right? So when I saw the Indian guy, and he's really smart, I'm sure, because he's Indian. And then there was this black girl. I've never seen a black girl play classical music, so she must not be the pianist. Those are my assumptions, right? I can't really guarantee that's what she was thinking. So all I could do was decide that in case that was what she was thinking, I needed to do her a favor and politely teach her that maybe her expectations were managed, stale, and stereotypical. So when I realized that, I told her I would gladly take her and show her where she should sit. And I took her down to the front row, right in time for them to call my name for me to come up on stage and play the piano. And so instead of really saying anything, I just sat back and played this instead. Instantly, she sort of realized that her scope had been limited. Now, again, I can't pretend to tell you what exactly she saw when she saw me, but it hadn't been for whatever reason, it hadn't crossed her mind that I might be the one about to play the Beethoven. But I will tell you this, it did feel like when she was looking at each of us, examining each of us, she saw something familiar in each of us and something she had encountered before in people who looked like each of us. Something she had come to expect, and when she saw me, it wasn't that I would play the piano. Know this, diversity is dynamic. It's always changing and moving. People groups change, values change, lifestyles change. What you thought you knew is probably already outdated. So go in assuming that you have not seen or experienced it all, even if you are the most well-traveled, culturally sophisticated person you know. There is diversity even in our own realities. My family before 2020 and now is very different. Excuse me. We look the same in some ways. We're still an African-American family. I'm still female. My husband's still male. My son and daughter are a foot taller, but we homeschooled. I'm very different after homeschooling. Had no business homeschooling, but I had to, right? We quarantined. We're much closer. for better and for worse. We grew closer during the times we had a family church in our living room. That's when I found out that my son had taught himself to play the guitar pretty powerfully during the pandemic and had a gift I didn't have, which is playing by ear. He could play along with all the worship music. I wouldn't have known that if we hadn't been locked together for the last year and a half. In my free time, I even ran for political office. Man, do I see people differently now. My viewpoints have changed. My understanding of people have changed. My passions have clarified. I am not the same person I was a year or 2 years ago, and neither are you. So why would we expect that as we begin to come back to campus, as we begin to come back to the workplace, that the people we thought we knew are the same? We have to assume that everyone is always changing and evolving. They may not even be who they were yesterday, let alone in 2019. It's an assumption we get to make. And what that assumption does is it keeps us on our toes, keeps us in a place of expectancy and possibility. Here's your new mode of operation. We now intentionally are going to widen our scopes purposefully to make room for the changes that we need to make and that others have possibly made. And we're going to get excited to explore them. You know, when I was speaking of exploration, a little girl, one of the reasons I'm able to play before you today is I was one of the few piano students who actually really liked practicing. And when I meet adults after performances, they always say, man, I used to play, but I didn't want to practice, and so I quit. And I started asking, why was it that I loved practicing? You know what I realized? I practiced what I was supposed to practice for probably the first 2 hours. Then I would spend 3 to 4 hours exploring. So if I was playing Rachmaninoff, I loved Rachmaninoff. He's still my favorite composer. I got really curious about what else the music could do. And I would start to hear things a little bit differently. It was still Rachmaninoff in its own way, but I was starting to hear that there were new possibilities within these notes that had been written down, in many cases, hundreds of years ago. What we want to start to do now is intentionally decide that even if we know the notes, maybe we have permission to change even the rhythm a little bit. That one little skill, which I didn't know was a skill, would be the thing, the ability to change things up, sometimes spontaneously. A lot of you think of it as improvisation, would be the thing that started to take my career in an entirely different direction, in many ways, for me at least, much more powerful. We have to decide now, as the trailblazers, that we get to explore in between the notes. As leaders, we'll have to widen those scopes, like I talked about, beyond diversity of ethnicity and gender. And we do that by making assumption number 2, which is assume that no one wants to be invited to the table solely because of the quotas they fill. Dun, dun, dun. Just give me an amen if you know what I'm talking about. Yes, we want to be in the room, but not because you have to check off a box that says we should be in the room. Assume everyone wants to be valued for what they bring to the table beyond race and gender. We have to remember that in addition to diversity of race and gender, there's also diversity of experience and background. Lots of amens there. I promise you, anyone who would be categorized as a minority, which we'll talk about that later, sidebar, does not want to be included because of their minorityness. Yes, I just said that. It's not even a word, but I made it up. When we limit our discussion to race and gender, we end up quantifying human value, settling for quotas, letting our initiative stand in place of real human meaning. We don't have to settle, guys, for representation. we can now aim for true validation. You're in the room because you are valid, not because you are African American, not because you are Asian American, not because you're female, not because you're gay, not because we need at least one white guy on the panel, but because we are valid. My own differentiations, get this, outside of race and gender are what actually make me more vital in classical music, even though people will say she's one of the few African American female classical pianists. My background and experiences, get this, that come in part because of my race and gender also make me vital. From the past, there are things, right, like affirmative action in the US, or if you look at Ireland, right, they have a methodology of using mandatory quotas to get women in executive positions. Those tactics are necessities, but they were never seen as ideals by the people who benefited from them. In fact, many of us, I could be speaking for myself, have developed a bit of a complex, hoping that we are not in the room because we had to be let in, but we are in because they could not imagine a room without us. You are the ones who get to create those rooms that are open so wide that when people enter, they know immediately they are there because they are valued sincerely for what they bring to the table as a human. See, places of education that are going to be thriving and energized and healthy and well, emotionally and mentally well, means that we feel good about who we are and that the person we are is accepted for the value that we bring to the world around us. I think I've reached the statute of limitation, so I can say this now, but when I was in college at Northwestern, I was an intern part of my work study. I got to work in the admissions office in the music department. And one day when nobody else was in the room, I stumbled across my admissions file. And I know all of you executives are going, no, don't look at it. Well, it was like a long time ago. And I looked at it. And I was really wonderfully shocked to read the file. So I had really good SAT scores, but not the highest SAT scores. And everybody, Northwestern's one of those places where everybody was student body president, everybody was drum major, like we were all the things, and we were all very competitive about it. So I was curious, what was the reason they brought me in? Now, even though I was in the classical music department, we could probably count on 3 fingers how many other black kids were there. There was a flute player and then one other guy who played saxophone. That was it. That was us. So I knew that I was a rare commodity in that way. But what thrilled me was to read the words scribbled on a little Post-it note that was stuck on the top of the admission file, and it said, "We need her." It said, "Our campus needs her. She will bring value to our entire university." I loved not seeing that I was filling a quota, but that they had looked at me in the sum of my whole parts and said, "We need her in this room." Listen, you are the trailblazers. So as you look to build, remember, you are the people who are building. I believe that sincerely, that whenever there's an audience under the sound of my voice, they are called to be the leaders that get to operate in a way where their wisdom trickles down. So listen, no pressure, but you're it. And so I believe that as you look to build powerful new age workforces that reflect the diversity of this country, of this world, the ideal is that you will build spaces that value people, value their humanity, their ideas, and that the value has gone now beyond and is not decreased because of something as simple as the color of our skin. That you create spaces that offer value beyond gender. And then when we look around and find that we've created these places of value, the end result is, guess what? It's going to be a more diverse room. And no, I'm not asking you to be colorblind. That is one of my least favorite expressions, because to be that takes away our opportunity to revel in our uniqueness as people and as people groups. I want us to see all the colors, but I'm asking us to become value focused. You're going to assume now, another assumption, that both you as an individual and we as organizations, corporations, institutions of higher education, evolution is the order of the day always. I have my own evolution in the world of classical. In classical, we spend so many hours. I know there are some other artists as well on the line will back me up on this. We spend so many hours being able to replicate what has come before us. So we want to make sure the Beethoven sounds exactly like Beethoven would have wanted, even though we can't like call Beethoven up from the dead to ask him, is this how you would want it, right? But so we have all these books written on how Beethoven would have wanted it and how people would have played it during his time. Same with Mozart, same with Bach. It's called performance practice. And we spend a lot of time making sure that the articulation is right? So like in a Mozart, you shouldn't play it like this. If there are pianists listening, they are cringing because I slammed the pedal down for all of that. For those of you who don't know music, makes you no difference at all. Mozart must be played cleanly and dryly. So we spend a lot of time making sure all that's right, the hand position is right, all that stuff. And so in the world of classical music, there's this one piece that audiences expect you to play. It's a lot of pressure. Even if you don't know it when I say it, which is the Flight of the Bumblebee, you have heard this piece, whether it's been on your Saturday morning cartoons or on the most recent Super Bowl commercial. It's always in people's minds when they think of a classical musician. So when I sit down in a concert hall to play a straight ahead classical concert, many of the audience members are hoping, secretly expecting that I will play this piece at some point, maybe as an encore. It's an expectation. And when people hear it, they never expect it to be slow. They always expect it to be fast. They never expect it to be boring. They always expect it to be exciting. This is what's exciting about change. You know, when you think about evolution, people get a little bit worried about having to change, which, first of all, that phrase is backwards. We don't have to change. We get to change. It's one of the best things that humans are capable of. We've been doing it since we were in the womb, changing day by leaps and bounds. So why, once we're born, we think change should slow down? I'm really opposed to that. I believe we should always be evolving. But change scares people. Those of you who are working in institutions where it feels like, golly, I am really pushing this huge tugboat that doesn't want to change, it's because we have been taught that change is scary and that evolution is like cheating on yourself. Did you hear what I just said? We're afraid of change because we've worked so hard to be who we are that we get worried that if we change, we're admitting that something was wrong with who we are, which there might have been, and we sort of buck against having to become something new. The phraseology we are changing as the trailblazers is that we get to evolve. And that if our eyes are open wide enough, we get to see opportunities, invitations, we get to accept to change every time. But in the world of classical, there's no changing this one piece. People expect it. It's the core of the repertoire. This is what they expect it to sound like. Every time. It's core. That's what they're expecting. That's all they want to hear. You guys have to decide. Remember that there is more music still to be heard. Now, how do you as the trailblazers begin the process of introducing change into your communities, your environments? You don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. People still need to hear something that's familiar. So they still want their Flight of the Bumblebee. But see, when you take your core, and I know who you are, the people who tune into things like this have a certain core. You have a strong belief system, a strong faith in what's right and what's wrong. That still goes with you. Hopefully you have strong opinions, strong stances. They get to come with you. That's your core, your ethics, your values, your perspective, your background, your experience. That comes with you. That's your core. And once you have laid down a track record of always presenting that core powerfully, that gives you permission, because that core now is a foundation of excellence that you've been operating on. That gives you permission to be able to, jazz things up a bit. So what I started doing in classicals, I understood, man, I've been playing this classical stuff for years, but truth is, I like other music. And so I had to look back at my own track record and realize I'd established a foundation of excellence. I had permission now not to limit my artistry to what certain audiences were expecting from me. And I could decide now that the foundation I laid down was powerful enough. I got to still deliver on the core, right? But I had permission to begin to jazz things up a bit. And what I will tell you is that I got a little fearful that audiences who just had come for the Mozart or the original Flight of the Bumblebee would leave. And the truth is, I started to pick up a whole new audience. I'll tell you about it after this. The fun I started having when I was now going beyond managing expectations to exceeding them, surprising them a little bit. So over time, I got really concerned. I told you at the beginning that I was going to lose audiences. But here's the thing. When you start to really believe that what you're doing is a part of the breakthrough that's necessary, because remember, they were telling me in classical music is dying. Right? And I would come out to audiences where sometimes I was the only African American in the room. I was the only person under 98, right? And so they were telling me the audiences are graying and dying out. Nobody wants to come. And I'm like, but I'm still here. I want to come. I love this music. So something must be wrong in the way we are talking about it or presenting it. And so instead of saying that I was giving a classical piano recital, which was starting to be no longer true, I came up with a whole new moniker for the experience I was crafting. But here's my point. If you're serious about diversity, the first diversity initiative you have to commit to is the one that requires you to diversify yourself. You see, many of us are having these conversations and we're still limiting ourselves to 40% of who we are as we're having the conversation. My audiences started to diversify the more I started to diversify. I didn't create a diversity initiative. I became more honest and truthful about what my entire artistic experience was, decided to bring that all to the table, and new audiences started to arrive. Now, I may have lost some people, but I don't know if I did, because if they got up and left a seat, it was instantly filled by the people who were seeking out the experience that I knew I was designed to offer. You see, what happens is breakthrough has a rhythm to it. And so what you'll start to hear is there's, a heartbeat to that rhythm of breakthrough. And the people whose ears aren't tuned to it right will hear it as impending doom. It's too much change. It's impending. It's coming to get me. They'll hear it as opposition. Those of us who are in charge of introducing change will get worried that this is opposition I'm feeling. But here's the thing. Breakthrough artists, that's you, we don't hear that relentless beat as opposition. We see it as opportunity. And what happens is when we see the opportunity is giving us permission to lay down a new baseline, right? It's not going to sound like all the Flight of the Bumblebees that have come before us. It's not even going to sound like the jazzier version that we do when we're still playing it a little bit safe. You know what I'm saying? What's going to start to happen now, you as the breakthrough artist here, are going to believe now that it's not enough to just shake things up a little bit. It's time for you to decide that you're going to be the whole darn remix. And what happens when you do that is the audiences that are designed to learn from you, the new leaders that you are designed to train and bring up, are going to start to find you. They're going to be magnetized to you. And instead of offering everybody's same old Flight of the Bumblebee, you're going to offer your own creation. I like to call this one the flight. So I did tell you that, listen, people might have left the seats. I don't know. Maybe they came for the Mozart and wasn't what they were expecting. I did lose one person, and that was my manager. Because he was like, Jay, what do I tell people? Do I tell them you're a classical musician, a jazz musician, a beat maker? Do I tell them you're a speaker, an inspirationalist, an author, a minister? He's like, what do I tell them? I told him, tell them yes. Yes, all of the above. Trailblazers like you, if you didn't know it yet, you're in an all of the above season. Those of you are like, it's not my job to teach. Yes, it is. Because it's an all of the above season. It's not my job to guide people. Yes, it is. Because it's all of the above. There was a season where you got to only be a classical pianist, Jade, right? When you would play your classical in Symphony Hall, and then you would play your hip hop stuff at Le Poisson Rouge in New York, which is like the hip spot. And then there was a season where I had to say, I'm not wearing my leather and mohawks in one place and my evening gown and my sensible hair in the other. I'm going to do it all in one space. It's an all of the above season. Something radical will break through when people like you decide that you no longer are compartmentalizing your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your background. You're now trusting that they all belong. Now, what I'm telling you has, in the last 40 minutes or so, took me about 5 or 6 years to really grow into. So it's a tall order because I'm asking you to do it now. Because had I known I had permission, it wouldn't have taken me that long. But I had to go to each space and realize these were all humans in this space. If I enjoyed this music, there was a chance somebody else in the room also did. And I was right, because when I did this, it was right at the age of where the MP3 was starting to really kind of catch on, and MP3 player, and everybody had, you could be sitting next to a suburban housewife and she could have like Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, and Dolly Parton all on the same playlist. Right? So it was like, it was an anything goes season. So I started creating experiences where anything went. I stopped saying I was giving piano recitals. Stop labeling yourself by one very limited term or a limited identity, because it's probably not even true in terms of all of who you are. I started saying that I no longer gave piano recitals. Instead, I took audiences on concert adventures that ranged Rachmaninoff all the way to rap, with world-class storytelling in between and inspirational speaking that would ensure you left the concert hall very different than you came in. Now, if you'd Googled classical pianist, you would have found a gazillion entries. You try to Google everything I just said, you will see one person. One person. And here's the wild thing. It's not even about that one person. It wasn't even about me, even though I was getting so much joy and freedom from performing in this way, my own personal diversity initiative. I was now opening audiences up to experiences they didn't know they needed. They knew what they wanted. I just want Mozart. I think you need a little African drumming in your life. I just came for the Rachmaninoff. I think you might want to hear the rap on top of the Rachmaninoff. And by deciding that there was more to offer and believing that there was more that people needed, I stumbled across something that ended up changing my entire life trajectory and changing the level of impact I was designed to offer. As I'm closing out now, I want to push you a bit to make this last assumption. I want you to assume that who you are, where you come from, and the story that comes with you are absolutely necessary. You see, I told you I was experimenting with all these things, and before they had all been things that were compartmentalized. But before you can be truly comfortable before we all can be truly comfortable with the diversity around us, we must get comfortable with the diversity within us. I got very curious about whether or not there was a room where all these different slices of myself could be on one stage. And so you saw me start to do one of the things that would change the way my concert experiences were. And so I'd begun to diversify, which was powerful. But here's your fourth assumption. You're going to assume diversification is not enough. I know, right? All that hard work. I just told you to decompartmentalize, bring all yourself to the table, diversify yourself, and it's still not enough. For those of us who are in charge of diversifying the rooms that we lead, it's not enough. Empowerment must be the goal. If you want to truly set a bold vision, don't settle for diversification. I know, right? Like I won't let you settle for tolerance, for acceptance, for representation. Now I won't even let you settle for diversification. No, empowerment. Everyone we already know is not going to be in an official position of power, but everyone must have power. You people are the powerhouses. What does that mean? People think when they go, Jade, you're a powerhouse speaker. You're so powerful. That's not a powerhouse speaker. A powerhouse speaker pours power back into the audiences she is serving. A powerful leader, a powerhouse leader, does not hoard power, they pour power. So to me, to empower is the act of having poured power into others, the flow of power, meaning the force that strengthens people with the opportunity to access greater things, to operate in their gifts, to share ideas, to create safe and productive environments, to affirm one's equality with others around them. Power must not be stemmed at arbitrary or discriminatory points. Early in my career, I noticed a trend. I was getting a lot of bookings in February. I could not figure out, why am I so popular oh my goodness, it's Black History Month. Do you know that like every year I would have a gazillion bookings in February and then my bookings would taper off? My managers were always really excited before I fired them. They were always really excited about February because it guaranteed an increase in engagements, which meant an increase in their commissions. They looked forward to February. But then I noticed that they started waiting on February because February would like make up for the rest of the year. Now, to be fair, there was also Women's History Month in March. I get a few bookings there. June, I don't know if you know or not, is Black Music Month. I get a few bookings there. October is Hispanic Heritage, I think, week. I don't know if they even get the whole month, right? Luckily for me, I was a specialist in some Latin music, especially one of a certain Cuban composer. So I got a few bookings there. But I noticed I was being used to add diversity to people's lineups. But then I was limited to where I could make my impact. I was confined to a few months in the year. So I did something that I'm sure the other members of a very small group of Black classical musicians thought was career suicide. And I know it really did not make my managers happy. I started taking February off. No concerts in February. I'm on vacation celebrating Black History Month. Challenge my managers not to allow us to be relegated to making limited impact when we had proof of performance. Proof of performance. I had power that I wanted to share, and I didn't want it to be limited to 1 month of the year. You see, an empowered workforce, empowered campus has to be made of diverse individuals who have been empowered, not necessarily to take over a space, right? Not to oust all others from the space, but they have a real tangible opportunity to fill a space. Not just in the expected roles or the corners of a space. That means there now has to be a process for how we transmit power and transcend our own limitations as an organization. We must aim now to have arenas, to build arenas, because that's who I'm talking to, the builders, where individuals feel empowered to develop further as a person and as a professional. We must create spaces where people feel unafraid to evolve. The worst thing that can happen is you get into a room because of a certain diversified label, and then you evolve beyond that label. Now what? Once I show you who I am, I'm also going to need room to grow to become more than I am right now, to become more diverse personally as well. So as you are building rooms, don't build rooms that look like rooms of access that become the new prisons. Build rooms that have expandable walls. Most importantly, we must be encouraged to display our own diversity and make as much impact as possible. I told you I would tell you how I felt about the word minority. I hope you don't take offense to this. I hope you take note. I don't use the word minority when I'm speaking of myself, and not when I'm speaking of people groups who would be considered demographically to be minority. The word itself has the word small built into it. My nature will not allow me to label myself as small. So if I'm in a room where I would be considered a minority, I tell myself, you are not the minority. You are the standout. What that means is if I'm in a room where I am in not as much company with people who look like me, then I must be in that room to deliver experiences that others have not had, to bring perspective that others have not had. I assume that, which means that I am no longer ever in any room at the wrong time, never in the wrong room. Do not be limited by these man-made labels. Assume that everywhere you go, you come with intrinsic value that must be added. Here's your final assumption as I end. You need to assume now that you must bring all of yourself to every single table, every single time. All your talents, your gifting, your skills, your abilities, your best ideas, your insights. This is probably going to be the best season that we get to do this. This window will not be open forever. Do not kid yourself. This is a special moment in time that we get to operate on a heightened awareness of what is right. Let it not devolve into a season of eye rolling or finger pointing or anger or guilt or shame. Determine for it to be the most powerful season of exploration possible. That exploration undoubtedly unleashes innovation. And as people self-innovate, their minds are open to new possibilities and solutions that they have not explored before. There is more to harness, more information to pull from, more people to serve. The organizations that harness diversity as fuel will be the disruptors of the future. Period, point blank. People, this is you, people who shake themselves up intentionally are the ones most likely to shake up their industries, their environments in the best way possible. I saw this in my own career. I took a really big risk because I told you it was risky. I'm sure we did lose people, but my career changed, and it's funny. The more I diversified my offerings, I started getting more invitations from straight ahead classical organizations. People are addicted to honest presentations of talent that sometimes show them parts of themselves they have been afraid to explore. And that's what my experience was offering. As I began to, really as you begin to unleash more of yourself and transform your organizations, as you begin to remake your marketplaces, your campuses, accept in advance that everyone will not be your audience. Can I just let that sit for a bit? Everyone's not going to be your audience. But if you are truly becoming more of who you truly are as a human, as an organization, as a university, the right audience, the right students, the right faculty will find you. My biggest risk was in daring to mix elite music, Beethoven, with street music, rap, which I loved. But it was like a secret when I was a classical music student. I decided I didn't want any more secrets, right? This is what it looks like. Don't let this be the ending spectacle of the keynote speaker. Let this be what it looks like when you decide to bring all of yourself to every single table. Thank you so much, Simmons and friends. All of you have joined in today. It's been an honor to perform for you. We will end with a Q&A, but I'm going to end right now with this performance called Black Beethoven. Hope you enjoy it. I was 12 years old, trying to find my way in. Thought I'd enter a competition. I played Beethoven. They went fool when I hit the keys real fast. Really, they was worried that their precious Steinway wouldn't last. I won it all, had the trophy in my right hand, but on my left was a seersuckered old man. He looked me dead in my cute little black face, told me with a smile I was a credit to my own race. I was worried for this man, he about to get got. If my angry daddy was in earshot, but he kept going, said he wished the others were like me. If only they would play a little Beethoven and Debussy. I shoot him off, no time for nonsense, but who'd have thought I'd keep running into ignorance. One chick thought I was the usher, so I seated her in row 9. Then I proceeded to take the stage, proceeded to blow her mind. Get up off of my gown, clown. Get up off of my stage, Gage. You're not gonna block this shine. Ryan, you're not gonna hamper this grind. Brian, get up out of my trailer. Taylor, get up out of my cake. Jake, you're not gonna hold this back. Jack, didn't you know Beethoven was black? You whack. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm ready for your questions now.
Absolutely phenomenal, Jade. I was over here bopping.
Yes. I wish we were live so you could hear the bass. We were trying to sound check, and I'm like, I usually wait until like the chandeliers start shaking, then I know we
yes,
got it.
This is phenomenal. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you just
thank you for the love in the comments. Thank you so much.
Yes, the comment section was going as you were going. It was just building up. You built up to this keynote, the performance. Awesome. I saw folks saying, "Oh, we wanted more performance," but
I know.
This is DEI work, and so this is a whole different approach to that, and this is beautiful. So thank you so much. So yes, you all, if you have any questions for Jade, please feel free, put them in the chat. I also want to say that we have 2 wonderful student volunteers that had some questions as well. So I want to open that up to Katie Ochoa and from UMass Boston. Yeah. And also Katie Lara from Simmons University. So if you all are available, I know you had some questions to ask, so please feel free.
And nothing is off limits. Please feel free.
Nothing's off limits. I think while they're getting themselves together, I think we did have some questions from the audience about your inspiration. So what brings you the most joy from performing? And you talked about how you started, but if you want to elaborate more on that, like how you got started.
Of course, the original iteration of my career was, I'm one of the lucky ones who got to live out my childhood dream, which was simply to be a classical concert pianist. So in my early career, I played with orchestra, solo recitals in really important halls. I got to play at the White House. No, Obama was not home, which was very disappointing, right? I played for a Christmas event at the White House. I played at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I always tell the story on stage that it was kind of a moment where I was running myself ragged, competing. Right, I think as an African-American female, feeling, subconsciously that I had to be extra classical, and I was tired, and in order to get through the weight of the music, I would tell stories in between the music, and like they say, the rest is history. I started speaking to the audience. That speaking had its own effect. I now make the majority of my time as a corporate speaker. And so you'll see presentations like this. This is why it is speaker heavy. The music is the accent to the points that I'm making. But so my career today is very diverse, still as diverse as it was when I was driving my managers crazy.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. I see some other questions in the chat. Where are you performing next? They want to know.
Yeah. So make sure you check out jadesimmons.com. That'll have events on it. I reserve the first part of the year. We have so many back-to-back corporate engagements, and those of you who are artists know it's a very different mindset to do this versus playing real straight ahead concerts where I get to play hours, of lots of music and create a whole different experience. So by the fall, you'll see straight ahead concert dates. So we're very excited about that. Summer and fall.
All right, just even to follow along with that. So one of the questions that the audience did submit was, describe the best performance you've ever given and what made it special.
It's funny enough. we've had a couple with orchestra that are just transformative. Again, for those of you who are classical artists especially, there's nothing like playing with this, full 100-piece orchestra backing you and playing this incredible romantic music is my favorite. But I think the concert that changed everything was when I started speaking and I saw the reaction to the speaking as well as to the playing. And people were having these moving experiences and they were wanting to change their whole life because of some nuggets I dropped spontaneously. And that's when you kind of realize, oh my gosh, there's so much power in what we get to do. And so that was early in my career when I started speaking. And that was kind of one of those aha moments where I knew I could never go back to just playing straight ahead.
Awesome. So I think that our student volunteers are ready. So I believe Katie or Chua, you're ready to ask your question. Chime on in.
Yeah. So hello.
Hi.
My name's Katie. I'm a student at UMass Boston and works with the Department of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The question that I wanted to ask you was, what is the most powerful thing that you have seen come about through collaboration, whether that's through people, communities, or discourses, and what does that power look like to you?
Recently, I did a virtual presentation with a really big communications company, and I'm usually pretty brutally honest and say we're very discriminating with the places we decide to do D&I for. We have to know that it is something they genuinely believe in some way, shape, or form that's beyond, again, the protocols or the quotas. And so this was one of those companies, but I wasn't expecting the response afterwards, Katie. I got done, and the CEO had spoken before me. And when I'd gotten done, my phone rang, and it was the CEO, and this is a British guy, and he's running this American company, and he said, what you said about diversity is how I've always felt about it in my heart, but I've never had the words. And so he was like, we want you to come back now and go into every department of the organization because those are the words. And it's a very rewarding thing to know that you were not just entertaining people, but that they were moved to a point of change, right? I'm a natural performer, so I know the art of moving people, but there's a difference between that and really impacting in a way that when you're gone, when the music has stopped, they're going to implement things and do things, that the culture is different now. So those are always the things that move me the most and really make me fall to my knees in a position of gratitude that I get to do this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie. Asking that question. Yes. And I believe we have Katie Lara that's going to ask a question as well from Simmons University, our student volunteer.
Hi.
Chime in.
Hello, my name is Katie Lara. I'm a sophomore economics student at Simmons University. And my question is, do you believe it's important to have more art-related education? And if so, what do you think is the best way to implement funding for art-related education in low-income communities?
Wow, I think it's really crucial. I mean, growing up, my introduction to, let's say, clarinet and viola were because there were those programs in the public school. My mother played piano, so I would have probably always been exposed to that. But I didn't get to play an orchestra or marching band or those things until I went to schools that had them. So it is hard for me to see schools that don't even have those. Matter of fact, we're moving my son out of his current school because he's a budding musician and his school doesn't offer that. And we love the school otherwise, so it's a hard decision. I think it is definitely important. You actually can judge historical societies based on how they have valued their art. So when you think of the cultures that we pride, that we look up to so much, they had extremely high levels of art. And so I think you will see a decay in thinking when you take art out of what we're doing. So I was very happy to see STEM eventually change to STEAM, right? It's like, okay, we're back in there. In terms of funding, that's always the tricky question. I don't think your funding always follows the change in the value system. Case in point with diversity. Suddenly, we have all this funding or some funding for diversity initiatives. Why? Well, something had to happen, namely George Floyd in this case, where suddenly we see representation on commercials. I told someone, I've never seen this many Black women on TV, like in beauty commercials and cosmetics. And I was like, where did this happen? And the bittersweet thing about it, Katie, is that we go, wait a minute, it was that easy? meaning it was very easy for we see corporations and organizations to flip the switch and decide to be representative. And so I think the arts has to have a moment where people see the value of it. And I think right now we're overcompensating because we're so behind in education that we've prioritized, of course, tech and STEM, rightfully so in many ways. But I do believe that we'll have to look for, probably it'll come from private sources that already value the arts, and we'll have to see that offered to schools as an alternative.
Thank you so much, Jade. I think we'll have time for like one more question here. Mm-hmm. So I know, and I'm going to sneak this in real quick. Folks are asking, are you going to write a book? You're a creator. So
yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm working on a current book. I have one book out called Audacious Prayers for World Changers. I am a minister, but I wrote the book before I became an ordained minister. I felt like we were just speaking too small in general about what our possibilities were individually. But I'm currently writing a book about purpose, because I think we've misunderstood what purpose is. I always say your purpose is not the thing you do. And man, if we could get this in college, that would be great, because it's not the thing you do. It doesn't matter what you major in. Sorry, mom and dad. Your purpose is actually the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. So for me, the purpose I thought was to play the piano. And then when I saw the reaction in the audience when I was speaking, I realized my purpose was to activate people into becoming bigger, bolder versions of themselves. That freed me from doing it at the piano. I could write a book and do it. I could minister and do it. So when you get that, it changes, it takes the pressure off of the things you're doing, because now you can focus on the effect that you're having with the thing that you're doing. So I am working on that book. Hopefully it'll be out late spring. And I do see a direct message question about outreach and speaking performance with children. I used to do a lot of that in my early career. And now what I do is whenever I go to a corporation, if I'm able to stay in that city, I will usually come in early and speak to either an elementary school, middle school, or high school, or go to a youth organization. In fact, Rochelle, I was going to say we have to connect, because I come to Boston in the spring. I would love to do something for the kids that you work with. That would be powerful.
Absolutely. So, the program has 33 districts. So
let's do it. Let's do it. And I will say the reason I do that is when I was growing up, I didn't see any other Black female pianists. All of my role models were 80, 90-year-old European guys, for the most part, who were playing the music I loved. Someone asked, what music do I love? Rachmaninoff is the one I lose myself in every time, classical music still. So when I go into schools, it's really wonderful. I used to travel with an assistant who was white, and at this time I had a guy who was traveling to work on the piano who was also a white guy. And when I would sit down and play, the kids would gasp, because they hadn't assumed that I was going to be the one who sat down and played the piano. And so just that moment for me is a powerful one, because it's letting them know things aren't even as we expect it. We can expect a lot more of ourselves. There's a lot more that we are able and have permission to do. So I'll end on that note. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jade Simmons. I wish I could clap, but I don't want to mess up the sound here because I'm loud. But you are definitely amazing, amazing, amazing. And I'm just looking forward to more to come. I want to thank Simmons University. We want to thank our partners. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suffolk University, Bunker Hill College, UMass Boston, Emmanuel, Simmons University, Office of Advancement, Office of Organizational Culture, Inclusion, and Equity, Offices of Recreation and Student Wellness, and the Center for Leadership and Engagement. Special thanks again to Jade Simmons. Also to one of my professors, Gary Bailey. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Dr. Sharon Cradle, thank you so much for this opportunity as well. Thank you to all of you that are in the audience right now that came, listen, those that are watching the recording that weren't able to make it. Thank you so much to our student volunteers from UMass Boston and also Simmons. Absolutely. Also want to encourage you and invite you to continue to show up to our programming, to Simmons future events and DEI initiatives, and complete the survey to that'll be in the chat. Complete the survey. We want to hear from you. What else do you want to see or hear from us as well at Simmons? Additionally, we will share this recording of today's sessions for those who registered And any questions and learn more about the organizational culture, inclusion and equity programming, you can send an email to ocie@simmons.edu. I was your moderator, Rochelle Smith, alum 2021. My pleasure and my honor to be here with you all today. Jade, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.